Number 10. Vampire Trucker. In 2013, a Utah man was arrested for bringing women inside his truck and keeping them as sex slaves. How did he get them in his truck? He pretended to be a sexy vampire. Timothy Vafides, whose name definitely adds to this story, used to wear fangs to make himself look like a creature of the night. But instead of acting like royalty, he chose being a trucker instead. Obviously, a trucker and vampire isn't the best combo, but he called his semi the Twilight Express to add some extra flavor and appeal. He started his venture in the mid-90s and lured young girls onto his truck, promising to show them the good life. But it didn't take long for his true colors to come into view and his charming persona to wear off. He would eventually switch into predator mode as he filed down his victims' teeth with a knife and sexually abused them while driving around the country. The girls were usually impressionable young 18 and 19-year-olds, but he's also been accused of assaulting his own relative and sometimes even minors. Surprisingly enough, though, no one really caught on to him as he kept his bizarre vampire trucker cult going for almost 2 decades. Of course, he had so much power over his prey that they never spoke up against him. The operation was only revealed during a random interaction at a weighbridge in Minnesota. One of the officers there noticed bruises on an 18-year-old with him, which led to the man finally giving up his cover in 2013. He later pled guilty to his crimes and was sentenced to 20 years in prison. Number 9. Out of gas. In May 2019, a woman who'd run out of gas on the I-24 accepted a truck driver's request to take her to the next exit, but instead of helping and dropping her off, he decided to kidnap her. 63-year-old Roy Nellish from Alabama had been a long-haul trucker for over 40 years and was driving one of his usual routes along the I-24 in Kentucky. When he got close to Fort Campbell, he came across a woman stranded next to him on the road with car troubles. Apparently, she'd run out of gas, so Nellish offered to give her a ride to the next exit in Tennessee, which the woman humbly accepted. When the exit came up, he didn't pull over. The trucker kept on driving. At this point, she obviously started to scream and tried to escape. Nellish knew what he was doing, though. He pulled over, pointed a gun at her, and told her he's going to kidnap and rape her. Now, the struggle began, as he tried to force her into the sleeper part of the cab and assault her. During the fight, the woman managed to turn his gun around and pull the trigger, but sadly, the weapon didn't fire. So he continued to hit her in the head and handcuffed her to the sleeper. Again, though, she proved to be too much for him as she slipped out of the cuffs and attacked Nellish from behind with a blanket. And just like that, she was able to put him in a chokehold while steering the truck and honking for help at the same time. The trucker finally gave in and pulled over to let her out. Even though she got help, Nellish was able to flee the scene. That being said, he was arrested a few miles down the road in Springfield, Tennessee, where the police found weapons, digital cameras, a bloody bag full of women's underwear, and laptops with violent pornography on them. He was indicted for his crimes in 2020, but passed away in jail only a couple of years later without serving his full sentence. Number 8. Up in Flames. In April 2019, a Texas trucker who'd never committed a crime in his life caused a fireball explosion that killed 4 people. 26-year-old Rohel Aguirre Maderos was working for a Houston-based trucking company and was hauling lumber in his 18-wheeler. He'd done this a million times before and confidently knew the route through Interstate 70 like the back of his hand. But whether it was due to a lack of attention or something else, he failed to spot a rush hour congestion on the road ahead in Lakewood, Colorado. And just like that, he plowed straight into over a dozen vehicles, including some other trucks. He was going over 80 miles per hour or just under 130 kilometers an hour, which resulted in a massive fireball explosion. The accident was incredibly devastating for everyone involved. It ended up killing 4 and hospitalizing 6 others. In fact, many people called it one of the worst road accidents they'd ever witnessed. According to police, this was easily avoidable since before the crash, Rohel swerved multiple times and forced others off the road when he could have just used a runaway truck ramp instead. Rohel survived the crash but was sentenced to a whopping 110 years in prison. Most people thought the sentence was too harsh since his driving record didn't even have a blemish before the accident, and he didn't even show any signs of drug or alcohol use either. As a matter of fact, over 4.5 million people have signed a petition to reduce his sentence, and other truckers have also boycotted the route to support and raise awareness for him. Number 7. Free candy. In 2019, a trucker kidnapped 2 Belton children by promising them to buy an iPhone 8 if they got in his vehicle. 47-year-old Marshall Pendergrass messaged the 12-year-old boy and his 14-year-old sister on Instagram, saying he'd get them a bunch of snacks and spoil them. For their first hangout, at least, he actually did do that, but his next request for them was to tag along with him so he could buy them an iPhone 8. So, thinking they were going to get some free stuff, the children obviously agreed. They waited until their mother had left the house on a Friday to meet Pendergrass at a nearby truck stop. Also, according to the boy, he thought they were going to Metro PCs to activate the phone and sign some paperwork. The trucker had other ideas and wanted to kidnap them and take them to Nevada instead. So when he didn't stop for a while, the children told them to just take them home. Pendergrass, on the other hand, replied by saying his GPS wasn't working and they needed to calm down. At this point, they told him to either take them home or get an Uber for them, or else they'd call the police. Again, he was having none of it and zip-tied their hands to keep them quiet. Thankfully, law enforcement pinged his cell phone near Winslow, Arizona, where they found him at a truck stop. Even then, he initially didn't let them search the truck, saying it was in the middle of the night, but the girl stuck her foot out of the top of the bunk of the cab, which officers spotted. Pendergrass was arrested on the spot. Number 6. No bikes allowed. In June 2021, an Arizona box truck driver was sentenced to 16 years in prison for plowing into innocent bicyclists on a Nevada highway. 45-year-old Jordan Alexander Barson was driving on Route 95 between Boulder City and Searchlight when he fell asleep at the wheel. This was his regular work route, so it wasn't like he didn't know what he was doing. Sadly, in front of him was a group of 20 cyclists who were making the annual 130-mile or just under 210-kilometer ride from Las Vegas through the scenic desert in Nevada and California. Also, they were pedaling behind a Subaru Outback support vehicle to protect them from the headwind. Little did they know the real danger would come from behind. Barson plowed straight into the cyclists, crushing them between his truck and the support vehicle. As a result, 5 of them died and 4 had to go to the hospital for treatment. Later investigation revealed that the trucker was driving under the influence of methamphetamines, and he was actually 9 times over the impairment limit. So after a quick trial and a lot of remorse, Barson was sentenced to 16 years in prison and had to pay $60,000 in restitution to his victims. Number 5. Sweet Tooth. In September 2020, a Knoxville ice cream truck driver lured a child into his van and kidnapped the young girl. 29-year-old Troy Allen Stansbury was apparently driving around the Clinton neighborhood looking for someone to victimize when a 15-year-old child showed up at his truck to get some treats. Thinking no one was around, the driver promised to give her free ice cream if she came with him. Thankfully, the girl's grandmother saw her getting into the truck and immediately reported it to police. In the meantime, though, the owner of the ice cream company also called the police department, saying one of his employees hadn't returned with the van after his shift ended. Authorities were quickly able to identify Troy and the child. Only a few hours later, the girl was found in a motel in Caryville, Tennessee, where Stansbury was apparently going to engage in forced sexual activity. He was arrested on the spot and fired from his job at the same time. He was then charged with aggravated kidnapping. Number 4. Highway Oven. In June 2022, a Texas driver smuggling migrant workers caused one of the deadliest incidents in history when 53 of them died in the back of his truck. 45-year-old Homero Zamorano Jr. had been trafficking migrants from Mexico, Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador for quite a while, and this definitely wasn't his first rodeo. He was also in cahoots with 28-year-old Christian Martinez, who'd been formally charged with human trafficking offenses. While Homero was easily able to pass through the US-Mexico border, he hadn't accounted for another major factor: heat. So with the sweltering temperatures going well above 100 degrees and no water supply in his cargo container, the poor migrants were basically stuck inside a moving oven. The air conditioner also had died, which Homero didn't even account for. As a result, all 53 of the workers died in the back of his truck. According to reports, a lot of these migrants boarded the vehicle to escape poverty and live a better life in the US. On top of this, the operation was run like a well-oiled machine, since they even had a stash house for transferring workers between trucks to avoid suspicion. At some point, Homero realized what had happened and ditched the truck, but he was eventually found hiding in a bush nearby and was arrested by police. Apparently, he was also under the influence of methamphetamines. He now faces a sentence of life in prison and up to $250,000 in fines. Number 3. Heist Man. In July 2022, a Kitchener man was arrested after ramming his truck into a business and stealing merchandise. According to Waterloo Police, the 39-year-old man was in a transport truck with a trailer and was looking for an opportunity to break into a store and steal stuff. When that opportunity presented itself at around 5 a.m. on a Saturday morning, he reversed the truck straight through the store's window and broke in. Obviously, at the time, so early in the day, the store near Highland Road West was empty, with no one around the area to stop the rogue trucker. The man had free reign, so he took his sweet time getting everything he wanted. As a matter of fact, he apparently caused over $30,000 worth of damage, including the items he stole. Oddly enough, after he was done stealing, he didn't just hop back into the vehicle and drive away. Instead, he abandoned it and decided to escape on foot instead. With that being said, he was eventually arrested and charged with dangerous operation, breaking and entering to commit theft, and failure to report the incident. He awaits a formal sentence for his crime. Number 2. Oncoming traffic. In 2019, a Massachusetts truck driver steered into oncoming traffic and killed 7 members of a motorcycle club. 23-year-old Volodymyr Zajewski was towing a car carrier along Route 2 when he reached for a drink, but he may have underestimated his ability to keep control of the vehicle since his truck shifted weight and steered itself straight into oncoming traffic on the other side of the road. Coming down the opposite side was a group of bikers from the Jarheads Motorcycle Club, which is mostly made of Marines. Then, in a split second, Zajewski's truck rammed straight into them, killing 7 riders and injuring many more. There was a massive outpouring of support for the riders killed, with a memorial being built for them called the Fallen 7. While the driver pleaded not guilty, saying he was just reaching for a drink, toxicology reports revealed he had detectable levels of fentanyl, morphine, and cocaine in his system at the time of the accident. As a result, he now faces a life sentence in prison. Number 1. Raining money. In July 2022, a Jamaican truck driver gained access to a customer's vault and ran away with almost $1 million. 28-year-old Juvel Thompson was a driver and delivery man for the Vault Security Company. While he had been in the business for a while, he couldn't help himself when he came that close to so much money. He had to take risks to make a quick buck. Unfortunately for Juvel, his ambitions were much greater than stealing just a few $100,000. He wanted to steal the whole lot and become an overnight millionaire. So, on a Saturday night, he signed for the vault key and transported the cash to Royal Flat. But instead of delivering it, he opened the vault and took the entire stock of $750,000 with him home. Sadly for him, his newfound riches were short-lived since he was arrested a few days later and charged with embezzlement. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe. See you next time on The Bad Badger.